This story is a work of fiction, inspired by real events. Names, dates, locations, and identifying details have been changed or dramatized to protect privacy and enhance the narrative. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, is purely coincidental or used fictitiously. This content is intended for entertainment and educational purposes only. It does not aim to glorify crime, promote violence, or pass judgment on real individuals. Viewer discretion is advised. Some scenes may contain mature, disturbing, or triggering content. What you are about to watch could have happened anywhere, to anyone. It's inspired by real events. Whispers of truth, buried beneath layers of fiction. We've changed the names, the dates, the locations, but the emotions, the betrayal, the fear, those are real. This story is not meant to accuse, only to reveal, to make you question, who do you really trust? If stories like this keep you thinking, long after they end, hit subscribe, smash like, and drop your theory in the comments. Now watch closely, before the truth disappears again.
The silence of a small town shattered in one violent second. Tires screamed across the asphalt, metal crumpled against flesh, and a body was thrown into the night air. Neighbors rushed to their windows, some to their doors, only to be blinded by flashing red and blue lights dancing across the quiet street. On the pavement, a man's body lay broken. Paramedics worked frantically, voices clipped and urgent, but already the air carried the weight of finality. Just a few feet away, the car sat twisted, its hood crushed, its engine hissing. Behind the wheel was Angela Carter, a 52-year-old woman whose hands clung to the steering wheel as if letting go would unravel her completely. Her chest rose and fell in sharp bursts, her face pale under the flashing lights. Neighbors could hardly whisper the words. She ran him down herself. Not a stranger. Not a criminal. Angela, a woman they knew, a woman they had seen at work, at church, in the grocery aisle. She was the last person anyone imagined could bring this kind of devastation. To those around her, Angela had been the definition of resilience. A mother, a worker, a woman who had carried burdens quietly and still found a way to laugh, to love again. And when this man entered her life, it looked like fate had finally offered her a second chance. Together, they seemed steady, ordinary, enviable. But behind the smiles and the routines, shadows had been spreading, shadows no one could see until they swallowed everything. Because betrayal, when it comes, doesn't always announce itself. It creeps in slowly, corrodes silently, until one day it consumes what once felt unbreakable. And for Angela Carter, that betrayal cut so deeply it turned her love into a weapon. No one yet knew what secret had driven her to this edge, but soon, the world would. This is not just the story of a crime. It is the story of how trust shatters, how heartbreak hardens into rage, and how a woman once defined by sacrifice became the face of an unthinkable act. Before flashing lights painted her name across headlines, Angela Carter's life looked ordinary, almost enviable. At 52, she was known in her community as steady, hardworking, and dependable. She lived in a modest home on a quiet street, the kind where neighbors waved from their porches and church bells marked the rhythm of weeks. To most who knew her, Angela was a woman defined by resilience. She had carried burdens quietly, weathered storms alone, and still managed to keep her head high. Her days followed a familiar rhythm. Mornings began with coffee in the same chipped mug she had clutched for years. Work filled her daylight, but evenings were for home, for dinners cooked, for small talk, for the comfort of routine. Yet behind that sense of order was the quiet truth: Angela longed for something more. She longed to feel seen again. That longing was answered in Michael Harris. At 40, 12 years younger than Angela, he carried the swagger of a man who knew the power of his smile. He was magnetic in ways that drew people in, smooth with words, quick with charm, his presence filling every room. To Angela, who had spent so long fighting to keep her life steady, Michael felt like a release. He was warmth, laughter, companionship, the promise that her story wasn't finished yet. Together, they looked like proof that second chances were real. Walks at the market, shared barbecues in the backyard, evenings on the porch where Angela's laughter sounded younger than her years. Neighbors admired them. To outsiders, it was a portrait of love rediscovered. But Angela's world was not just hers. Living under her roof was her daughter, Emily Carter, just 16 years old. Emily was quiet, bookish, still more child than woman. She had a softness about her, the kind of innocence that made Angela fiercely protective. Emily was the reason Angela worked herself to the bone, the reason she fought to keep life steady no matter how heavy it became. And Michael, at least on the surface, seemed to embrace Emily too, treating her with warmth as though he were settling into the role of stepfather. It seemed almost perfect, a man who loved her, a daughter she cherished, and a home that finally felt full again. But perfection has a way of blinding the eyes. Angela began to notice little things. The phone calls Michael took in hushed tones. His absences explained away with easy excuses. The silences that sometimes hung too long when he thought she wasn't watching. Angela noticed. She wasn't naive. But love, when it finally returns to a lonely heart, has a way of dulling suspicion. She told herself she had nothing to fear. She told herself happiness was real this time. What she didn't know was that the shadows creeping into her home were darker than she dared to imagine. And soon, they would consume everything she thought was hers. The first cracks in Angela Carter's world came quietly, like whispers in a room no one else could hear. At first, it was small things, Michael's late returns, his quick smiles when she asked questions, his easy explanations that smoothed everything over. He had a way of making doubt feel silly, of turning suspicion into something she was almost ashamed to hold on to. But unease has a way of growing roots. One evening, Angela stepped outside and found Michael on the phone. His back was turned, his voice low, urgent. When she spoke his name, he flinched. He turned too quickly, covering his unease with a grin. "Just a buddy," he said. But his eyes betrayed him. They darted, restless, as though caught in a lie. Angela felt it then, a cold throb beneath her ribs. Something wasn't right. Friends noticed, too. A coworker leaned across a lunch table one afternoon, lowering her voice, "Are you sure he's good for you?" Angela laughed it off, but the question clung to her. She carried it home, replaying it in her mind when she lay awake at night. Michael's charm was her undoing. On her darkest days, he lit the room with laughter, made her believe she was still beautiful, still wanted. Those moments were intoxicating, and Angela clung to them desperately. Because if she looked too hard at the shadows, she feared she might lose everything she had fought so long to find. And then there was Emily. 16, shy, still soft with innocence. Angela's love for her daughter was fierce, protective, almost consuming. Emily was the reason she kept moving forward, the reason she believed her sacrifices mattered. Michael seemed to understand that, or at least pretended to. He teased Emily playfully, lingered in small conversations, the kind of attention that might seem harmless. Unless you were a mother watching too closely. Angela began to notice the changes in her daughter. Emily avoided eye contact when Michael was near. Her laughter felt forced, brittle, like a note struck on the wrong key. Sometimes, when Michael entered a room, Angela saw her daughter stiffen ever so slightly, the kind of detail a mother cannot miss, no matter how much she tries to deny it. At first, Angela told herself it was just teenage moods, the restless defiance of 16. But doubt grew heavier each day. At the dinner table, Emily grew quieter. In the evenings, she retreated earlier to her room, shutting the door with a firmness that wasn't there before. Angela noticed the silence, noticed the walls building inside her own home, but fear kept her from pulling too hard at the threads. Because somewhere deep inside, she already knew. The math no longer added up. The glances, the silences, the excuses, they were all pieces of a puzzle she was too afraid to put together. Angela Carter couldn't name it yet. But the truth was already moving toward her, a truth that would shatter her family and leave blood on the road. For a time, Angela Carter believed she had finally won her place in the sun. To her friends, her neighbors, and even to herself, it looked as though life had given her back what the years had stolen. Michael was attentive, generous, and full of gestures that lit up her days. He brought flowers without reason. He cooked her dinner with playful confidence. On weekends he whisked her away on long drives, the wind tangling her hair as his laughter filled the car. Angela held on to those moments like glass in her hands, beautiful, but always at risk of shattering. Their home seemed alive again. Summer evenings carried the sound of clinking glasses and laughter as Michael grilled in the backyard. Sunday mornings, he slid an arm around Angela in church, nodding solemnly as hymns rose around them. Neighbors looked on with admiration. To them, she was proof that second chances were real, that love could return when you least expected it. Even Emily, her 16-year-old daughter, seemed woven into this picture. Michael teased her about school, asked about her favorite books, sometimes sat a little too close when offering advice. To the casual eye, it looked like kindness, the effort of a man trying to build his place in a family. Angela told herself that was all it was. She wanted to believe it. But there were details she couldn't unsee. Emily's smile around Michael always seemed a beat too late, her laughter brittle, like glass under strain. More and more, the girl excused herself when he entered the room, hurrying to her bedroom and closing the door. Angela brushed it off as moodiness, the restless defiance of 16, but deep down, the unease lingered. At night, when the house was still, she sometimes woke to hear Michael's voice through the walls. Low, urgent, words too muffled to catch. When she asked about it in the morning, his smile was quick, his kiss quicker. Just a friend, he'd say, and Angela, desperate to protect the life she was building, let herself drown in that reassurance. She told herself not to look too closely. Because what if she found something she couldn't forgive? What if all of this, the flowers, the laughter, the steady arm at her side, slipped away? So Angela kept her eyes closed to the cracks, convincing herself she had finally found her golden age. But golden ages never last. And this one was not a new beginning. It was the fragile pause before the collapse, the last breath of calm before everything came crashing down. It began with signs too sharp to ignore. Emily's color fading, her hand pressing absently against her stomach, the school notes about absences Angela had never approved. She told herself it was stress, a passing illness, the turbulence of 16. Anything but the truth. One afternoon, while straightening the bathroom cabinet, Angela found what she wasn't ready to see. A slim cardboard box, shoved behind half-used bottles. Her hands trembled as she pulled it out. The test inside had already spoken. Angela sat at the edge of her bed with the box in her lap, the house humming its ordinary sounds, the refrigerator clicking, the clock marking each second with cruel indifference. She rehearsed explanations in her mind. A boyfriend Angela hadn't met. Some secret fling at school. But when Emily walked in, wide-eyed and fragile, every imagined excuse collapsed. Angela tried to begin gently, but the words came as a whisper sharpened by dread. Emily, tell me the truth. Her daughter's silence said more than words. Tears filled her eyes, her shoulders folded inward, as if she wanted to vanish inside herself. Finally, through a cracked voice, Emily admitted what Angela had prayed she would not hear. She was pregnant. Angela's chest hollowed. Her mind clawed for another name, any name, to make the impossible make sense. A boy from class. Someone at a party. But Emily shook her head. Her lips formed the name slowly, each syllable a blade carving into Angela's chest. Michael. For a moment, the world seemed to fall out from beneath her. She thought of him in her kitchen, laughing. His arm around her in church. His smile when neighbors envied them. And now this, her daughter, 16, carrying his child. Emily's tears streamed. I didn't know how to stop him," she whispered, her voice breaking. The words crushed Angela's lungs. Her daughter had been cornered, betrayed, destroyed inside her own home, while Angela herself had been blind. When Angela found Michael in the backyard, phone in his hand, he wore the same confident grin. But it faltered when he saw her face. For once, charm could not shield him. He reached for excuses, for soft lies wrapped in easy tones, the same tricks that had disarmed her for months. "It's not what you think," he muttered. She wanted. The words died in his throat when Angela's voice cut him like ice. Her fury needed no volume, it was the silence of storms before they strike. Memories flickered inside her as he spoke. The flowers, the dinners, the late-night whispers through the walls. The moments she had chosen trust over suspicion, love over instinct. Each memory turned sour, feeding her rage. Every kindness had been poison. Every touch, contamination. Michael moved toward the street, keys in hand, as if escape were still possible. He glanced back once, his smirk returning, as though she could still be fooled. That was when clarity came. Angela's body moved before thought could intervene. She reached the car, the metal door heavy in her hand, the ignition turning beneath her fingers. The steering wheel vibrated against her palms, the engine roaring alive like something she no longer controlled but had summoned. Michael stood ahead in the wash of the headlights, framed by the glare. For a breath, she waited, for fear, for remorse, for a plea that might pull her back. None came. His arrogance was the final push. Angela pressed her foot to the pedal. Tires screamed. The car surged forward, closing the distance in a blink. Impact split the night in a sound that seemed to tear the sky open. Michael's body lifted, then fell, the silence afterward louder than the crash itself. Neighbors spilled onto their porches. Shouts rose. Phones lit up with frantic calls. Paramedics would come, officers would circle, headlines would later capture what happened in cold, simple words. But in that moment, Angela sat frozen, her hands trembling against the wheel, her chest heaving as if the air itself had turned to glass. She turned her head, and in the doorway of the house she saw Emily, her daughter, 16, shaking, her face streaked with tears, watching everything collapse. And in Angela's mind, another image rose, Emily at 6 years old, wearing a paper crown, frosting smeared on her lips, lifting her arms to be carried. The memory struck her harder than the crash. She saw her daughter then and now, innocence stolen, life scarred. The world roared back, sirens, footsteps, orders shouted into radios, but Angela barely heard them. She knew only one truth, carved into her like stone: betrayal had poisoned her home, and she had torn it out the only way she knew how. By morning, the story of Angela Carter was no longer confined to the quiet street where it happened. It spread like wildfire. News vans lined the block, their antennas stretching into the sky. Headlines screamed across television screens and front pages: mother turns car into weapon. Love triangle ends in blood. Overnight, Angela's private tragedy became a public spectacle. The courtroom stripped the humanity out of what had happened. Angela was not a woman betrayed, not a mother torn apart, she was a defendant, a case number, another file stacked on the judge's desk. Shackled in chains, she sat at the defense table, her expression a hollow mask. The prosecutors told a story of rage and violence, a middle-aged woman who let jealousy and anger drive her to kill. The defense spoke of betrayal, of a child's innocence stolen, of a mother's instinct twisted until it snapped. But the jurors' eyes always drifted to Emily. 16 years old, shoulders hunched, face pale beneath the courtroom lights. She was not just a daughter, she was evidence, the living wound that testified to Michael's sins. Every time she walked through those doors, she was forced to relive what had been taken from her. Each camera flash outside the courthouse cut deeper into her shame, branding her as both victim and witness. In the town, opinions fractured. To some, Angela was monstrous, a murderer who had crossed a line no one should cross. No betrayal, they whispered, ever justifies blood on the road. But others, especially the women who had known betrayal in quieter forms, spoke of her differently. They said she had acted when no one else would, that she had protected the only thing she had left when the world offered no protection at all. Angela's act was not the neat, noble justice people read about in books. It was raw, violent, irreversible. Yet it forced a question no one could answer cleanly: when trust inside a family is corrupted beyond repair, where does justice live? In the courts? In the streets? In the desperate heart of a mother who could no longer stand still? When the verdict came, guilty, the courtroom fell silent. Angela did not weep. She did not plead. She lowered her head and let the chains tighten around her wrists. It was not freedom stripped from her, but the last pieces of herself she had not already lost. The years that followed did not erase the story. It lingered in whispered conversations, in the cautionary tales parents told their children. It lingered in Emily's life most of all, etched into her memory as the night her innocence was stolen, then avenged in blood. Angela's legacy was not just a crime scene, or a courtroom verdict. It was a warning carved into the lives left behind, that when love is corrupted, when betrayal strikes at the heart of family, it leaves nothing but ruin in its wake. Angela Carter's story is remembered not for the crash itself, but for the betrayal that made it inevitable. What happened on that quiet street was not born from sudden madness, it was the slow corrosion of trust, the poisoning of love, the shattering of a bond that was meant to protect. Betrayal has a power unlike any other. It does not come from strangers. It comes from the people we welcome into our homes, the ones we let closest to our hearts. And when it strikes, it does not simply wound, it unravels everything, leaving nothing untouched. Behind prison walls, Angela carries not just her sentence, but the ghost of every sign she ignored, every smile that concealed a lie. For Emily, 16 years old when her world collapsed, the scars are deeper than any courtroom could measure. Her innocence was stolen, her childhood ended, replaced by a truth no one should have to carry. And so the story lingers, in headlines, in whispers, in memory. A reminder that when love is corrupted, trust does not survive, justice cannot heal, and family cannot remain whole. What remains, always, is ruin.